For most of his life, David Renner wasn't a sailor. He was a civil engineer from Denver, Colorado, a man who built bridges over land, not one who crossed oceans. At 58, with a successful career behind him and a comfortable retirement ahead, he found himself staring at maps, not of highways and city grids, but of trade winds and ocean currents. His late wife, Helen, had always dreamed of the sea. After she passed, that dream didn't die with her. It transferred to him, becoming a mission, a way to honor her memory and find a new purpose for himself. David wasn't impulsive. He was an engineer, a man of calculations, stress tests, and meticulous planning. For 3 years, he immersed himself in the world of sailing. He took every course available, from basic keelboat to offshore passage making. He crewed on other people's boats, learning the rhythms of the sea, and he researched. He spent thousands of hours poring over sailing forums, magazine reviews, and boat owner groups, searching for the perfect vessel to carry him around the world. His search ended with the Orion 42, a brand new model from a respected mid-tier European builder, Orion Yachts. The boat was marketed as the ultimate blue water cruiser for a discerning couple or a solo sailor. It boasted a sleek design, a robust grid-stiffened hull, and state-of-the-art systems. Brochures featured stunning photos of the Orion 42 slicing through turquoise waters, with captions promising unparalleled safety and legacy craftsmanship. For David, it was the perfect synthesis of modern comfort and rugged dependability. It was his dream boat. The price tag was a staggering $650,000. It was nearly all of his retirement savings, but he justified it as an investment in his future, in Helen's dream. He placed the order, and a year later, in the spring of 2022, he flew to the shipyard in France to take delivery of hull number 14, which he christened the Helen R. The first year was everything he had hoped for. He sailed the Mediterranean, finding his sea legs and growing in confidence. He visited the ancient harbors of Greece and the rugged coastlines of Croatia. The boat performed beautifully. The autopilot was flawless. The sails were crisp, and the interior was a comfortable haven. He felt a deep connection to the vessel, a sense of pride every time someone at a marina complimented its elegant lines. He sent photos back to his grown children, photos of him smiling, tanned, and truly happy for the first time in years. But there was a ghost in the machine, a hidden structural flaw that was the result of a catastrophic compromise made at the very highest levels of Orion Yachts. 2 years before David's boat was built, Orion Yachts had been facing a crisis. A new competitor had entered the market with a similar boat that was both lighter and cheaper. Orion's CEO, a man named Jean-Pierre Dubois, was under immense pressure from the board to cut costs and increase production speed without redesigning the entire boat. The head of engineering, a veteran designer named Marcus Thorne, proposed a solution he would come to bitterly regret. The Orion 42's design called for a complex, hand-laid fiberglass grid to be chemically bonded to the inner hull, creating a single, incredibly strong structure to support the keel and mast loads. This process was time-consuming and expensive. Thorne's cost-cutting proposal was to switch from a full chemical bond to using a structural adhesive putty, a sort of super-strong glue in key areas, supplemented by less fiberglass. On paper, and in their computer models, the new method, known internally as Project Phoenix, still exceeded minimum safety standards. It would save 40 hours of labor and nearly $10,000 per hull. Dubois approved it immediately. Production on hull number 8 and all subsequent Orion 42s, including David's hull number 14, would use the Phoenix method. What the computer models didn't fully account for was the dynamic, cyclical stress of real-world ocean sailing. The constant flexing, pounding, and twisting of the hull in heavy seas. Marcus Thorne knew this was a risk. He had voiced his concerns in a confidential memo to Dubois, stating, "While Project Phoenix meets ISO certification standards, it significantly reduces the vessel's fatigue life and long-term structural redundancy. I cannot guarantee hull integrity, after 5,000 nautical miles of severe offshore conditions. Dubois buried the memo. The company's survival was at stake. He told Thorne to sign off on the design, or his career at Orion was over. Reluctantly, Thorne complied. The secret was kept, locked away in a file cabinet in Dubois' office. The company knowingly sold a boat with a hidden vulnerability, a ticking time bomb built into its very bones. David Renner, blissfully unaware, sailed his Orion 42 for over 6,000 nautical miles. He crossed the Atlantic from the Canary Islands to Barbados, a 2,800-mile passage that was the ultimate test of his abilities. The boat handled the long ocean swells with grace. He felt invincible. His confidence in the Helen R was absolute. He was ready for the next great challenge, the Pacific. After enjoying the Caribbean, he transited the Panama Canal and set a course for the Marquesas Islands in French Polynesia. A grueling 4,000 nautical mile journey, the longest non-stop passage of his life. He was prepared. The boat was provisioned, the systems were checked, and he had downloaded the latest weather GRIB files. The forecast showed a stable period of tradewind sailing. For the first 2 weeks, the passage was a sailor's dream. He had consistent 15-20 knot winds just abaft the beam, pushing the Helen R along at a steady 7.5 knots. He fell into the rhythm of the ocean, a cycle of watches, meals, and sleep. He felt Helen's spirit with him, watching the sunsets that painted the sky in fiery colors. On the 18th day at sea, he was approximately 1,500 miles from his destination, in one of the most remote places on Earth. The stable weather began to deteriorate. A low-pressure system, deeper and more aggressive than forecasted, had developed to the north, creating a confused and powerful swell. The waves weren't mountainous, but they were steep and sharp, around 12 to 15 feet, and coming from an awkward angle. The Helen R began to slam hard into the troughs. The sounds inside the boat changed. The gentle creaks of a vessel at sea were replaced by sharp, percussive bangs. David, an engineer, was attuned to the sounds of structural stress. He reefed the sails down to a minimum to slow the boat, but the violent motion continued. He was concerned, but not yet alarmed. The boat was designed for this, he told himself. It was an Orion. Around 3 a.m., during a routine check below deck, he noticed something that sent a chill down his spine. The floorboards near the mast step were slightly warped, pushed up by a millimeter. It was almost imperceptible, but to his trained eye, it was a glaring red flag. It meant something below was moving, something that should be absolutely rigid. He pried up the floorboard. The sight beneath made his blood run cold. The bilge was filled with a spiderweb of fine hairline cracks radiating out from the structural grid. A thin trickle of water was weeping from one of the cracks. The grid, the very skeleton of his boat, was failing. The Project Phoenix cost-cutting measure, the adhesive putty and reduced fiberglass, was breaking down under the relentless cyclical stress. The keel, a 7,000-pound bulb of lead, was starting to move independently from the hull. Panic, cold and sharp, seized him. He knew what this meant. This wasn't a leak he could plug. This was catastrophic structural failure. The boat was literally breaking apart beneath him. He scrambled to the nav station and grabbed his satellite phone, his hands shaking so violently he could barely dial. He sent a text message to his son with his GPS coordinates and a single terrifying sentence: "Boat is breaking up. Activating EPIRB. I love you." Then he triggered the emergency beacon. The sounds from the hull grew worse. The sharp bangs became deafening cracks like giant trees snapping in a forest. The mast, no longer supported by a stable hull, began to shudder violently. He feared it would come crashing down at any moment. He had to get out. He donned his survival suit, grabbed his ditch bag, and deployed the life raft. The sea was a chaotic nightmare. Getting into the raft was a brutal fight against the waves, but he managed it, cutting the painter line just as a much larger wave crashed over the Helen R. From the sickeningly small safety of his raft, he watched his dream die. He heard one final deafening crack that echoed across the water. The mast toppled over with a metallic shriek. The boat, his beautiful, beloved Helen R., began to sink rapidly by the stern, its bow pointing to the sky in a final, accusatory gesture before sliding beneath the black waves. It was gone. David Renner was alone, a tiny speck in the middle of the world's largest ocean. For 48 hours, he was tossed about in his raft, battling hypothermia, dehydration, and the crushing despair of what had just happened. He was eventually rescued by a French naval vessel, responding to his EPIRB signal. They found him delirious but alive. The aftermath was a different kind of storm. Once back on land, David began a quest for answers. He contacted Orion Yachts, expecting sympathy, an investigation, perhaps even an offer of compensation. Instead, he was met with a wall of corporate denial. Their official response, drafted by a team of lawyers, was cold and clinical. They claimed the loss was due to an encounter with a submerged or semi-submerged object, or alternatively, operator error in extreme weather conditions beyond the vessel's designed parameters. They implied that he, an experienced engineer and sailor, had either hit something or had sailed recklessly. They completely denied the possibility of a manufacturing defect. But David was an engineer. He knew what he had seen. The warped floorboards, the cracked grid. It wasn't an impact. It was fatigue. It was failure from within. His quest for justice became an obsession. He hired a maritime lawyer, and through the discovery process of a lawsuit, they finally unearthed the smoking gun, Marcus Thorne's buried memo. The Project Phoenix documents, the internal emails where executives discussed the known risks. It was all there in black and white. Orion Yachts had knowingly and deliberately sold him and at least a dozen other owners a boat with a potentially fatal flaw, all to save a few $1,000s per unit. The story exploded in the sailing world. Online forums that had once praised the Orion 42 were now filled with threads about the Phoenix hulls. Other owners began reporting similar, less severe issues, stress cracks, flexing floors. A class action lawsuit was formed. Orion Yachts' reputation was shattered. Their stock plummeted, and within a year the company filed for bankruptcy, brought down by its own greed and deceit. David Renner won his lawsuit, but it was a hollow victory. The money he received couldn't replace what he had lost. It couldn't bring back the Helen R., and it couldn't erase the memory of watching his dream and his wife's legacy sink into the abyss. He never sailed again. The joy was gone, replaced by a lingering trauma and a bitter sense of betrayal. His story, however, became a legend in the maritime world. It is a chilling, cautionary tale whispered in boatyards and yacht clubs around the globe. A story that serves as a permanent warning. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing on the ocean isn't a storm or a reef. It's the hidden secret a builder prayed you would never find.